Well, welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming. We will get started. I'm Whitney Richardson, the Illinois Power Agency's Legislative Affairs Manager. We're really glad to have you here again today for the final session in the IPA Summer School Series, which is an educational webinar series for legislators, government leaders, and staff to learn more about programs and initiatives pertinent to your work as legislators, policymakers, and point persons for constituents across the state. As those of you who have attended previous sessions know, this year's inaugural IPA Summer School was designed as a four-part series. Today, session 4 will give you a sneak peek into the soon-to-launch Clean Energy Dashboard as a tool to measure progress towards statutory clean energy goals in Illinois. In our previous sessions, we discussed the two IPA-administered solar incentive programs. We explored the consumer protections built into both programs, and we covered the equity initiatives that make up part of the agency's work in the clean energy transition. The recordings and decks for all previous sessions are now posted to the series webpage under the previous sessions heading. After today's session, we will share some collateral with you, as well as a recording of the presentation to support your ongoing learning and communications regarding these topics. Today's session is an educational forum, and the presentation will be recorded for future use. The presentation does not represent a legal interpretation. We'll reserve a few minutes at the end of today's session to respond to any general questions related to today's topic. The question and answer portion of the session will not be recorded. We can go to the next slide. Oh, can you back up one more? Thank you so much. Okay. We will start today's presentation by discussing the IPA's role in the clean energy transition and with an introduction to the new Illinois Clean Energy Dashboard, highlighting its goals, scope, and phase 1 and 2 development. We'll then discuss progress toward clean energy goals in Illinois and provide a sneak peek to the dashboard content using data visualizations. We'll have several minutes following the recorded portion of today's webinar for general questions related to the program. I will now turn the floor over to the IPA's director, Brian Granahan, to give an introduction to the Illinois Power Agency and discuss its clean energy responsibilities and the dashboard.
Great, thanks so much, Whitney. Can you hear me okay? Volume?
Yes.
Good. Wonderful. So my name is Brian Granahan. I'm the director of the Illinois Power Agency. Just a brief history around the IPA. We were established in 2007, initially to develop procurement plans and conduct procurement events to meet the supply requirements of those customers, residential and small commercial customers who had not switched to a competitive supplier. And at the time, RPS responsibilities, the development of renewable energy in Illinois, was kind of a responsibility bolted onto the side of the agency. In 2007, the scale of this wasn't really known and understood. And over time, our RPS responsibilities in facilitating the development of new renewables projects has actually come to become probably the thing that we spend the most time on the IPA above all else. And that came through different expansions to our responsibilities through the Future Energy Jobs Act in 2016 and the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act in 2021, both of which increased the scale of what we're trying to do on renewables, increased the funding available for facilitating more renewable energy projects, and then especially in 2021 with CEJA, introduced a number of qualitative characteristics that we're also seeking to employ in developing the clean energy economy. Now, one thing that's unique about Illinois versus some states, especially the west of us, is that we are deregulated. So you don't have the system that you would have in other states where a public utility goes to the Public Utilities Commission and maybe it proposes the development of a wind project or proposes the development of solar projects or storage projects. Instead, in Illinois, we have deregulated marketplace and we rely on incentives issued by the IPA to try to facilitate these projects' development, but they're owned by merchant generators rather than owned by the public utilities themselves. Now, in terms of why the Clean Energy Dashboard, I'd say the question that we're asked most commonly at the IPA, probably at least once a week, is some variation of how much renewable energy is there in Illinois? How far along are we on RPS targets? What percentage of electricity generation is a function of renewables? What percentage of electricity production is from renewables, or consumption rather? And we realized that there's a bunch of different data sets that actually feed into answering these questions. some of which are not necessarily even within the control of the IPA. So if somebody goes out and develops a wind farm but doesn't take advantage of our procurement processes, we read about that in the press just like everyone else does, but they don't have a formal reporting responsibility to us. So the Clean Energy Dashboard is our way to create what will eventually be interactive tools in order to allow users to come to our website and easily answer those questions, and also learn more about different things that the IPA does. So we have equity components associated with it. We have verticals for individual programs and initiatives, in addition to a broader statewide understanding of renewable energy development and a comparison of Illinois versus other states. So it's our effort to try to create a tool that we think is very valuable to legislators, to other policymakers, to reporters, to concerned citizens, or anyone else who really wants to see visually what's happening in our state with respect to clean energy development. So go to the next slide. So the IPA is responsible for the implementation of the state's renewable portfolio standard. And what the RPS is a requirement that a certain percentage of all retail electric sales are met with renewables by certain dates. Presently, it's 40% by 2030. But what's important to understand is that this is all done through the procurement of renewable energy credits, or RECs, which is the intangible attributes of renewable energy generation, decoupled from the energy itself. And those are procured and brought under contracts with public utilities like ComEd and Ameren as the buyer of those RECs, who then retire those RECs for RPS compliance obligations. It is not a measurement, the RPS at least is not a measurement of all of the renewables in the state. There's a number of projects that exist outside of the RPS that aren't taken into account into the RPS. And that's one of the things that we've had to navigate in developing this dashboard, is making sure that we have information about all renewables in addition to information about that which is happening through IPA initiatives. And Abby will get into some of those items in some of her later slides focusing on IPA initiatives. To implement the RPS, every 2 years, we develop a long-term renewable resources procurement plan, and that guides our program activity and procurement activity to occur over the subsequent 2-year period. To facilitate large-scale projects like the wind farms that you'd see from the interstate, or big solar projects like 100 and 200 megawatt projects, we do that through competitive procurement processes. But for your rooftop solar projects and community solar projects, there the incentives are administratively set, and it's more of an open enrollment program where entities who seek to develop those projects come in and apply to that program on a rolling basis. So there's a pretty big difference in the process through which those two different types of projects are being supported. So go to the next slide. So a little bit deeper dive into the RPS. The RPS was overhauled substantially through the Future Energy Jobs Act, which passed the legislature in December of 2016, took effect in June 2017, and caused us to develop these customer-facing incentive programs, the Illinois Shines program, the Illinois Solar for All program, to focus on the development of distributed generation projects. So those are your rooftop solar projects and community solar projects. And that incented the development of over 25,000 new renewable energy projects, much of that being rooftop solar of that 25,000. And then CEJA further increased the scale of those different initiatives. Now we have a 40% by 2030 goal. And if you look at what does that exactly mean, well, 40% is about 48 million megawatt hours through RECs by 2021. The overall amount of installed capacity in megawatts will vary based on the generation type. So to get to, say, 1 million megawatt hours annually, it might take about 350 megawatts of wind, but it might take about 650 megawatts of solar. So sometimes you'll see some disconnects between the megawatt hours and the megawatts, with the latter being the nameplate capacity of the projects and the former being the amount of generation that comes out of those projects. And in order to facilitate these more aggressive goals, the rate impact cap through which funds are collected from retail customers and then kind of pooled in order to be spent to incent the development of these projects was increased back in 2021 as well. So that's just a brief overview of the responsibilities that the IPA has under the state RPS, not entirely exhaustive. And that informs a lot of then what comes through in these clean energy dashboard slides, what we're showing, what we're measuring, how we're measuring it. And so hopefully that's a bit of a helpful overview. With that, I'll turn it back over to Whitney and Mega.
Thanks so much, Brian. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so now I'd like to introduce you to our main speakers for today's program. We will first hear from Mega Hamal. Mega is the Chief Strategy and Communications Officer of the IPA. In this role, Mega is responsible for leading the development and execution of key strategic initiatives and priorities to engage stakeholders, spanning from making the agency's work more accessible to positioning the agency as a thought leader to providing analysis informing public policy debates. Megha is also responsible for overseeing internal and external communications, legislative affairs, data analytics, thought leadership, and media relations at the IPA. Next, we'll hear from Abigail Ramirez, the Data Analytics Manager at the Illinois Power Agency. In this role, Abigail works on strategic data projects and sets the standard for data communication and analysis across the agency, advancing the IPA's use of Tableau and exploring innovative approaches to problem solving. Prior to this role, she served as a program associate for the Illinois Solar for All program, where she contributed to the continuous improvement of that program's initiatives through data-driven approaches. I will now turn the floor over to Megha to begin today's presentation.
Thank you, Whitney. Thank you all for attending this session. So what is the Illinois Clean Energy Dashboard website all about? Well, this is a website that has been developed by the staff at the Illinois Power Agency under the vision of Director Granahan. And phase 1 of this project will be launched on October 2nd. Through the dashboard website, we hope to accomplish a couple of goals. First, we want to showcase the renewable energy development within and outside of RPS. We also want to convey the progress of renewable energy development through data visualizations and show how IPA programs and procurement support that growth. We also want the dashboard website to be an educational tool for stakeholders, whether it's legislators, media, clean energy advocates, or other key constituencies, by providing accessible data through which they can answer commonly asked questions. And ultimately, we really want the dashboard website to serve as an educational tool and really help explain the IPA's role in the clean energy transition. Next slide. So who worked on this project? This slide encapsulates that. This was a project that was built in-house, as I mentioned earlier, built by the IPA staff who are passionate about the IPA's work in the clean energy transition. These individuals have their independent full-time jobs, but they have contributed their skill set, whether that's a data-specific, storytelling, or project management, to bring this project to life. Next slide. So the phase 1 of this project, as I mentioned earlier, which will be launched on October 2nd for public consumption, includes 7 categories of visualizations. We wanted to take an incremental approach to this project by releasing static visualizations in the beginning, and that would give us some time to work on the interactive dashboards for phase 2, which would be available for mobile and desktop versions. So let's talk a little bit about what does the phase 1 of this dashboard website entail. So phase 1 of this project really entails visualization from these 7 key categories, which really serve as cornerstones or verticals for the Illinois Clean Energy Dashboard website. First one being electricity generation mix. This particular category explores the state's diverse energy sources and also looks at visualization that showcases the evolution of Illinois' electricity generation mix from traditional to renewable energy, and really compares Illinois' electricity generation mix with its Midwest counterparts. The second category or vertical is the Midwest solar and wind capacity. And this, the visualization from this category really looks at solar and wind installed capacity in the state and compares that of Illinois with other states in the Midwest. And really these visualization from this category showcase website visitors how the state is charting the solar and wind development of solar and wind generation in the state. The third category, which is called the IPA initiatives, this really gives website visitors a at a glance view on the IPA supported competitive procurements for large utility scale solar, wind, and brownfield projects, Additionally, this category also looks at our 2 solar incentive programs, Illinois Shines and Solar for All, and really offers visitors an opportunity to look at these projects for these specific categories, and also showcase how these projects support the state RPS, and show how policies like Future Energy Jobs Act from 2016 and Climate and Equitable Jobs Act from 2021 support the overall renewable energy development in the state. The other category, which competitive procurements. So from IPA initiatives, you can take a deeper dive onto competitive procurements, Illinois Shines, and Solar for All. And website visitors can really look at different projects that are energized and under development and compare that data from these specific categories. Last but not least, equity category is our 7th category, and really this particular category looks at visualization from the Energy Workforce Equity Portal, which was launched in January 2023 to connect clean energy companies with equity eligible persons. And through this category, website visitors can look at the makeup of equity eligible persons that are registered in the portal, and also look at jobs that are posted by clean energy companies in the clean energy sector that are hiring equity eligible persons. Next slide. So phase 1 of this project also provides these wonderful resources, one being the data download. It gives users an ability to download data for IPA data sets. It also gives users an ability to read glossary, which really includes definitions and acronyms that are used in the dashboard website. Also, we have FAQs that really provide website visitors with information on commonly asked questions and answer on the dashboard website, and then a couple of other resources that are outlined on the slide. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, phase 1 will include static visualizations from these 7 categories, and then phase 2, which will be launched later, will include 7 interactive dashboards from the categories that I discussed earlier, and will also include these dynamic dashboards will also be provided on desktop as well as mobile devices, and we'll also be releasing some targeted resources as part of phase 2. So I think that concludes my presentation. Back to you, Whitney.
Thanks so much, Megha. Now we will hear from Abby in introduction of the Clean Energy Dashboard and some of the data visualization, speaking to our clean energy responsibilities.
Thanks, Whitney. I'm very excited to be able to share with you all some sneak previews, but I did want to kind of highlight that with our time limitation, we might not be able to take a very in-depth perspective and kind of overview of each visualization, but slides will be available containing the visualizations. And then, of course, we suggest that you go ahead and explore the visualizations that we previewed today, as well as other visualizations that will be available when the dashboard launches on October 2nd. So we can go ahead and dive in to the next slide. So starting with electricity generation mix, as kind of Megha mentioned, this is one of 2 categories that maintains a really high level perspective of electricity generation, looking at it both in Illinois and in the Midwest. What we're looking at in these 2 sample visualizations is electricity generation mix within Illinois. And specifically, we wanted to give you an example of how we are trying to make sure that visualizations give users multiple perspectives of the data. So on the left, we are looking at more of a time series where it shows the electricity generation between 1990 to 2022. And so we can see over time how that evolved and changed. We can also have helpful indicators on when FEJA was enacted and when CEJA was enacted, so that viewers can have like some quick takeaways of when policy was in place and how that might affect the data. One caveat I do want to make is that the data does have a little bit of a lag because of the time it takes for those sources to be updated at a national scale. So it is looking at 2022 And we would expect to see that renewables have further development since 2022, and we will be updating the sources. So that'll change month by month as we update. Another thing to note is that this is specifically generation and not consumption. So oftentimes when we talk about decarbonization, we'll be discussing consumption, but this is in particular generation. And then on the right, we give you an example where we wanted to take kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum with looking at a snapshot perspective of 1990 and then looking at 2022. So you could really see the stark contrast of change that occurred. What these do here is that in the center, you'll find the overall capacity. So rather quickly, we can go ahead and compare those megawatt hours between each other. When we move outwards into that second ring, you can explore the three categories of either nuclear, renewables, or fossil fuels, and just have some really quick takeaways of what does that dynamic look like. And then lastly, on the outer edge, you will find the breakdown based on specific sources. So of the renewables, what does that makeup look like? What is hydroelectric looking like? For fossil fuels, what is the dynamic of coal and that percentage makeup? And I think it's a very quick perspective to be able to see that stark contrast compared to the one that we just saw. So we do want to give viewers multiple perspectives as they're looking through the data. Next slide. Midwest solar and wind capacity. This is the second one that gives us a comparison of both the state level and the Midwest regional level, and highlight both of those here. So on the left, we have a look at new installed capacity in megawatts in the state of Illinois between 2004 and 2024. I do want to highlight that the time in which the data was collected and is utilized is only a partial amount of the year, so we can expect that to increase once updates are made in that data and once that data becomes available. So we'll expect to see that. Another thing to note is we do see kind of that decline in wind, but that is something that we are seeing as a trend nationally. So it is something that we are expecting to possibly see in Illinois as well to follow with the national trend. On the right, we have a great perspective of now how not only do you see what a map looks like on the dashboard, but you also get to see what regional comparisons look like. So we have both a look at Midwest installed capacity in megawatts for solar, and we can right away see that Illinois is absolutely a player in the Midwest on its solar capacity. And then on the right, we can see wind and that capacity. We can already start to deduce that Illinois is in the top 3 of wind, with Iowa being the lead. So it's a great way for users to quickly kind of deduce information, and it also gives us the ability to expand outside of just looking inwards in Illinois. We can go ahead to the next slide. Now we're going to take a little bit more detailed dive, because from here on out, the categories will be focusing on IPA supported initiatives, starting with our IPA initiatives category itself. The purpose of this category is very much to be at a high level look. We want users to be able to quickly find project counts, to be able to readily identify how many megawatts are made up of those projects. And then we also wanted users to be able to go and take a slightly deeper level of that. So on our IP initiatives, we reflect 3 initiatives: our competitive procurements, our Illinois Shines, and our Illinois Solar for All programs. And users can also take a deeper dive into this by competitive procurements. We can take a look and see of the projects, how many are wind, how many are solar, how many are brownfield. For our programs, you can compare community solar makeup versus distributed generation. Now, this is all reflective of projects that are under REC contracts. So that's the data that is being reflected in this. And then the goal again is to stay high level here, because I'm about to show you that each individual category gives you a deeper dive of each. So we can go into the next slide. Starting with Illinois Shines, we already get to see a much deeper level of data. So on our left, we can see that we again have a time series, but this one is taking a look at energized installed capacity by geographical group. So comparing group A and group B, this gives users information on, of these projects, where do they reside, what utility territories are constituted in that makeup. And we also want to make sure, again, that we give users multiple vantages. So we wanted to give a cumulative look of the percentage breakdown of those groups, but we also wanted users to have a closer look by being able to see how that's evolved over time. I do want to mention that 2024 does look as if it's on a downturn in this visualization, but there's a few reasons behind that. First, when this data was captured, we're only looking at about 8 months of data in the year. So unlike all the other years, we haven't really rounded it out yet. This is going to look different in January when we get that full picture. And the second thing is that this is based on project application information, and that does take time to process for projects to be developed and to move into energized. So there are a few things to consider when looking at that. And then on the right, we get a perspective kind of similar to what we showed in electricity generation, but instead of that 1990 to 2022 comparison, we're looking at under development and energized projects. And this is a great way for people to immediately be able to answer the question of what's in the pipeline and what's actually online. What do those projects look that are running, and what are the projects that are hopefully going to be coming and making up the diversity of energized projects in the future. So we can start in the innermost again with that overall capacity, so we can make quick comparisons there. As we work outwards, we get into the makeup of distributed generation versus community solar. And then on the very outermost, we get to look at the category level for each of those programs. So the categories within this Illinois Shines program. And just as like a kind of note, we can see the equity eligible contractor category, which is a newer category to Shines, is kind of a big portion of that community solar that we're seeing in that under development. And we're expecting that all of that's going to start to diversify our energized projects in Illinois Shines. We can go ahead to the next slide. Now we're going to take a look at the sister program to Illinois Shines, Illinois Solar for All. And you might already be really familiar with what we're just looking. I just explained this in Shines. The reason for that is we wanted to have continuity in the dashboard. So we want users to feel like they can easily go and look at multiple different data sets, but with very similar visualization structures, so that I can go from Shines and compare something like distributed generation to something of that in Illinois Solar for All. So that's the purpose behind kind of maintaining that. And Solar for All follows the same structure of what we just kind of mentioned in Shines, except of course it'll be the sub-programs of Solar for All. And then what this one actually does is it adds another layer of information where we get the utility information below in tables, so that a user can go and see of the sub-program capacity, where does that capacity reside in which utility territory. So you can extrapolate a lot more localized information from this. And then on the right, we have a great example of kind of one of the beating heart components of Solar for All, which is income eligibility. And what this visualization demonstrates is the project capacity for projects that are under rec contract in Solar for All by if they're located in income eligible communities. So this kind of gives users multiple perspectives of that one data set. It gives you a highlight on the top by giving you the total megawatts of capacity that's being reported in this data, the amount of projects that make up that capacity. And then on our left, we again can get a perspective of the time, how much, like, we can look at the capacity as it's evolved by program year. I do want to note that in program year 2, we kind of see that spike, and that's because of a single procurement event that took place, the low income community solar pilot, and that contributed 9 megawatts of capacity. So that's why we see that increase in program year 2. And program year 7 is just beginning, so we will expect that to round out more towards May of next year. And then we can give users just another level of data and information by taking a look at our sub-program capacities on the side, so that users can get an idea not just of how has this evolved over time, but how does this look by sub-program. So of community solar, what portion of it is coming from projects in income eligible communities? You can actually also see that pilot that I mentioned at the very bottom, the low income community solar pilot, and both of those projects did come from income eligible communities. Now, in addition to this, we have different versions, very similar to this, for environmental projects located in environmental justice communities and projects that promote energy sovereignty. So we have multiple visualizations, but we're trying to still create continuity by following formats like this. We can go on to the next slide. Competitive procurements. Here we're getting, again, 2 kind of different visualization types. We've already seen an example of the maps in the Midwest Solar and wind capacity, but here we get an example of maps on the dashboard at a zip code level. So we're taking a look at the project capacity for competitive procurement projects at a zip code level. The darker shading of the zip code means the higher capacity that's located in that zip code. You might also notice that there's zip codes outside of the state of Illinois, and that's because of the adjacent state requirement. If you want more information on that, it's rooted in law, but we also have details on that in Chapter 4 of our long-term plan. And then on the right is actually one of my favorite visualizations for competitive procurements, because people who are new to competitive procurements and who might not understand competitive procurement events can, at a high level, take a look at this and understand kind of the different periods that we've seen of competitive procurement events. Starting on the right with the LTPPA, we can consider that as something like pre-SEJA. In our salmon color, we have post-SEJA, and in our dark blue, we have post-SEJA. In salmon, we have post-SEJA. In blue, we have our post-SEJA. And then below that, you'll actually be able to see the different sizing changes depending on the capacity that was represented in those procurement events. So really quickly, you can go and find the largest procurement event contributor based on capacity. And it's a quick way to kind of explore those events. We have deeper dives on each of those events and other visualizations that will be available. We'll go on to the next slide. We've made it all the way to our 7th and final category, equity. So equity is representing equity-driven data from our Energy Workforce Equity portal. And here we have actually another variation of visualization example with our equity eligible persons, our EEPs that are registered in our portal. And so here we wanted to draw a quick comparison for users. So on the left, we have a representation of the different demographics representing both the gender that's reported in the registration as well as the race or ethnicity that was selected in the registration. And we can see the comparison of the first year in the portal starting from January 2023 to December 2023, all the way to the up-to-date data. So we can see how that's not only grown in quantity of EEPs registered, but also in the diversity and makeup of those EEPs that are registered in the portal. On our website, we will have available kind of a deeper dive of the to-date information. So users will be able to take a look at the percentage breakdown and the EEPs for each of the gender reported or the race and ethnicities that are reported. And then on the right, we have an example of a reporting of jobs that are posted on the equity portal. And what this does is these are jobs that are posted by third-party companies to the portal. It acts similar to a job board, so that job seekers in the clean energy transition who are interested in jobs focused on clean energy go to the portal and look for those postings and hopefully apply and enter the workforce in that way. So this is reporting the jobs that are submitted by those third-party companies, jobs that are approved and posted to the portal. And then in the gray, we see the evolution. So it's just the cumulative total of approved jobs to those postings continuing to grow. So we can see that we're on an upwards trend of continued participation in that way. We have 2 other versions that are similar to this that also reference the EEPs that are registered in the portal, as well as the companies that are registered in the portal. So you'll see a mix of different visualizations for this as well. And with that, we've made it through the sneak peek. I'll turn it over to Whitney, and I think we should be going to Q&A.
Thank you so much, Megan and Abby. We are now reaching the Q&A portion of today's session, and we'll conclude the recorded portion. We have about 11 minutes for you to ask general questions related to today's program.